This tutorial covers the intermediate problem in Chapter 11, Exercise 24. We're going to start off with the code from Lab 11.2, so I'll copy that in, and that'll be our starting point. So here's our Lab 11.2 file. Notice that we have just two functions, display monthly and display total. And there we have our menu system. We'll need to add some menu items there because the task that you have here is to create three additional functions: display average, display high, and display low in this rainfall application. So we'll need to add those three functions. We'll go ahead and create the prototypes first because we know basically what we're going to need. All three of these new functions are simply going to output information, so we don't need any return values. We only need to pass an array of values with the rain amounts, and that'll get passed by default as a reference and the number of elements in that array. So we need a display average, and then we'll just go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and just copy this because that's a real time saver. When you start copying code you already know is correct. And then we're going to do a void display high and void display low. All right. As we look through the code from Lab 11.2, the first thing we have is some variable declarations, namely a rainfall for 12 elements representing the 12 months, and we're going to, by default, set those to 0. Then we're going to use a for loop, because again, you always use a for loop when you have a defined starting point, an end point, and an increment walking through those numbers. So we're going to use a for loop 0 to 12 by ones. And again, remember, this plus equal 1, many people like to do that type of operation just like that. It amounts to the same thing. Then we have a C out, enter the rainfall for the month for X plus 1. And then we do a CN for that particular element of our array. Now, this do while loop is our control structure. So we need to modify it so that it adds those three new functions into the mix. So we simply go in and add cout three for display average amount and del. Again, we want this to look like a menu system, so then we're going to do cout for display high value, high amount. Oops. Watch your typos. And then cout 5. And then, of course, we need to change this to 6. And then when we look at the way this part here is controlled, we need to obviously modify this quite a bit. I'm also going to make it more compact, I'm going to go ahead and raise this if up. And then I'm going to just copy this and I need several of these, right? I'm going to need 3, 4, and 5. And then I'm going to need to go back and modify these. So I've got 2. This one will be 3, and that's for display average. This will be 4, and that's display high. And finally, this one will be 5, and that will be display low. So there we go. Now, we also need to modify this while statement, because now, instead of just being 1 or 2, what we need to do is make sure that our choice is greater than 0 and choice is less than 6. Because once we get 6 or higher entered, then obviously we need to just stop. We need to also remember to undo our comment on our system pause. And then we need to start working on adding our new functions after the existing ones in Lab 11.2. So what I like to do whenever I'm doing that is, since I've already created the prototypes, I'll go ahead and copy them and move them to the bottom. Now I have a built-in reminder of what I need to create. So the first one we're going to create is this display average. So what we're going to do with display average is simply walk through the array, add up a total, and then create the average. So right off the top, we need 2 variables, double total, rain, and we always want to initialize. And then we also need a double average, and then we're going to use, because again, we know exactly start point, end point of this walkthrough of an array, so we're going to use a for loop. For int x equals 0, x less than elements x plus plus total rain plus equals rain amount of x. Once we get that done, we'll simply calculate the average, which will be total rain divided by elements. And now create output. Cout average rainfall. AVG indel. And we just put the indel in there just to give us a little spacing, give us a little room to work. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And I'm going to go ahead and run this now. I like to, every time I add a new function, if it's possible, if the functions aren't relatable or dependent on each other, I like to go ahead and run this when I can. So I'm going to go ahead and start this up. Okay, so now I'm going to add a whole bunch of data, 12 months worth. So I'm just going to enter some bogus numbers just so I know that I can get the right thing. So I'm going to go ahead and just enter tens. Which obviously is going to average out to 10. When I select 3, I get my average out as I expected. Now, if I want to stop the program, if I hit 6, I should get my close program pause message, which I do. So that's all working good. I did have to do one thing before I actually ran this. I went ahead and added just some bare bones return return keywords inside of my shell of these functions. So that was just to get past the compiler. So now I need to go back in and create this display high and display low functions. So these functions, display high and display low, are pretty simple in that they're going to walk through and look at each element within our rainfall amount array and decide whether I've found the lowest or highest, depending which function we're talking about, and outputting that information. So we start off by setting a value called highest in this case, and we set it to that very first element of the rain amount array, or the 0th element. Then we're going to walk through from 1 to the number of elements, incrementing by 1, and comparing that value with whatever our current highest value is. And then when we get finished with that, if that's true, then we'll set the highest value to this new value. We simply output that value in a statement, and then we're done. Same thing with the low, except now we're looking for values less than whatever this lowest value is. So it works basically the same way, but the whole point of this is you're walking through a one-dimensional array and accessing the values and taking a look at them. So that's pretty much all there is to this. So let's go ahead and run this. And I'm going to put in some different numbers this time. I'm going to go ahead and give a bunch of 10s. But I'm also going to put in a 5 for a new lowest value. And a 15 for our new high value. Okay, so now we have all of our arrays. So now we can display our average amount. Again, it should be 10, right? I entered 1, 5, and 1, 15, and the rest are all 10, so that would average out to a 10. If I enter 4 for the high value, I should get 15. And if I want to see the low value, I'll enter 5, and I get a 5. So our program is working as expected. So I hope you enjoyed a walkthrough of a one-dimensional array problem from our textbook and seeing how to actually get through the code for this assignment. This has been Mike Shore from Peace University.